going on, everybody? JT here. We've got C Will, we've got Crypto for Change, and today we have a fantastic guest. We've got Tony Edward of the Thinking Crypto podcast. Thinking Crypto is a fantastic YouTube channel you should all be following if you aren't already. But today we're super excited to have this conversation because, as with every day in crypto, there's a bunch of news out there. So we're going to talk about some of that BINANCE FUD. We're going to talk about the potential Bitcoin ETFs that people are sort of getting excited for. Maybe they'll get shot down again. Maybe they won't. We'll be talking about Vitalik selling some Ethereum and so much more. So be sure to hit that like button. Be sure to hit that subscribe button. And Tony, how you doing? Thanks for joining the show.
I'm doing great, man. It's great to be back. Thank you guys for having me.
Absolutely. We're very fortunate to have you back on as a guest. It's going to be our pleasure. But let's just jump right into some of the Binance FUD, because I think that's some of the biggest news of the last couple of days. There's been a lot of people saying, move all of your coins off of Binance, although sometimes I feel like this FUD sort of happens every 3 or 4 months or whatever at this point. But there's a lot of talk about the BNB price going down to a level around 200 or so, or below 200. I'm not exactly sure on the exact number, but there's fear of a big liquidation that, they believe CZ has a lot of this BNB tied up as collateral. And if it goes down, reaches this number, there could be a cascading event, maybe similar to the event after FTX because of the size of the position. How much do you know about this, and are you worried about it?
So personally, I'm not worried about it. I've been here since 2016, and I've seen so much FUD against Binance. Yeah. And don't get me wrong, they're getting sued by the SEC. The DOJ may drop another charge. But is that going to affect Binance.com? No, I think more Binance US. That business, I think, is in trouble. I've pulled off whatever I had on there. I'm personally not using them. I think it's too risky. But Binance.com is the world's largest crypto exchange. They're operating in some of the largest markets outside the United States. I think they're fine. And what we've seen, every time the market pulls back, there's some sort of FUD targeting Binance. And look, there are people who are trying to short it, right? So I think some folks don't understand the dynamics and the narratives that are put out there by short sellers, which is okay. That's part of the market, right? There's narratives that follow the bullish momentum and the bearish. And guess what? As soon as that price drops, the bears are ready. They put out the article, Binance sees this is going to happen to him, right? This is happening. So folks have to be aware of that. Now, with that said, if there are legitimate facts that come out and say, hey, this exchange is insolvent or something is happening, we can't ignore those facts. But until we get hardcore facts, it's just narratives, in my opinion.
Yeah, and I actually saw a narrative this morning in the news. I was almost about to make a short about it, but I haven't really got to the point yet. But it was actually talking about how Binance is, getting rid of their Bitcoin free, trading to some extent, or the fees that are there with their one of their largest pools between Bitcoin and Tether, USD. And that obviously is now the FUD that's fueling, like, oh my gosh, is it going to fall? And I feel like you're spot on. It's, there's nothing insolvent looking at, for Binance.com and, and the people using the platform. I know tons of people outside of the US who use Binance every day for, derivative stuff, longing, shorting, spot buying, holding, all that stuff. And they've never had an issue really, like I've seen even with some of these other smaller exchanges, Mexi, Qcoin, and some of these other ones that, they've definitely done some shady things, and you definitely wouldn't want to hold large amounts of money there. But it's true. It's like right when Bitcoin starts to weaken, the Binance FUD comes, and then you get, it's just a cascade effect.
Well, we seen last time when the bank runs were happening, Binance survived. So they showing that they have great reserves and that BNB token is strong.
Binance survives basically every time. I mean, it's been around for quite some time. But, you mentioned Binance US, and they recently, I believe, suspended the USD trading pairs. So not the stable coins, but the actual USD trading pairs. Do you think that's a troubling sign for Binance US from a financial standpoint, or do you think they just did this for regulatory reasons?
Oh, I think it's regulatory reasons for sure. And with Operation Choke Point, cutting off those banking rails. And in addition, with the lawsuit, I believe if I'm not mistaken, there was orders for them to do that. But however, just this past week, there was news they were working with MoonPay to help or enable the fiat on-ramp again. We're not sure for which tokens. For what I've seen, it might be Tether, USDT, and then there's a lot of USDT pairs with different cryptocurrencies on Binance US. So you know, it's kind of my concern is not so much the business, but rather the regulators that are coming after it. And that's the red flag for me. It's not that I don't, you know, something is happening and they're going to collapse, but the regulators are coming that hard. And, you know, I've interviewed quite a few folks and from advocacy groups like the Blockchain Association and so forth. And they're like, look, Binance is kind of the bad word in DC. No one likes Binance in DC. And that's, you know, that's a red flag for me, but just for Binance US, not necessarily Binance.com.
Yeah, but that's because Binance takes it's the leading exchange. It's got all the volume. It's the king, right? Like everybody wants that market share. They want that that volume that goes through Binance every single day. So obviously they have a target on their back, but I really hope they don't collapse because that I feel like would be the final tick on my you know, crypto bags plummeting bingo card, you know, Binance BNB collapsing or something of that nature. And I feel like that or Tether has always been like the dark cloud kind of looming to see like, oh my gosh, if they collapse, like is crypto really dead?
Yeah. A quick note on that, to your point, those who are at the top of the food chain, the king of the hill, they're going to get attacked from all sides, right? Yep. And I've spoken to some of the guys at Tether as well. Look, don't get me wrong. I think Tether's books were shady and a bit weird years ago. Even some of the founders I interviewed were like, yeah, they didn't do a good job years ago. But that's different from where they're at now. They're even using or holding US treasuries on the balance sheet. So I think they're in a much better spot because of regulatory scrutiny. There's more transparency. They're doing their active attestation, if I'm not mistaken, on a quarterly basis. So, but once again, as soon as the market pulls back, the short sellers put out their narratives, the anti-crypto people put out the narratives, and we've seen it time and time again. Then when the price goes up, they disappear. Funny how that works, right?
Yeah, they pack their bags.
Right. Something else, you know, another topic I kind of want to get your, you know, your thoughts on, because I feel like you've interviewed quite a few people in the space that have been close to this, and that is the Bitcoin, you know, spot ETFs and the, you know, Ethereum ETFs. Obviously, we saw you interviewed, I think the asset manager over at Jacoby, who they're the firm in Europe who has the, you know, the Bitcoin ETF approved and ready to go, and I think it's trading, right?
Oh yeah, yeah. So trading on the Euronext Amsterdam Stock Exchange.
Yeah. So, you know, what is your thoughts around like, you know, actually seeing a Bitcoin or Ethereum, you know, ETF approved in the US? Do you think that's something we could see in 2023, or do you see that happening 2024, you know, or beyond?
Sure. So everyone is waiting in anticipation of this. You know what? I wouldn't be as bullish on it if BlackRock wasn't here because of BlackRock's track record and how many ETFs they've gotten approved. They obviously have the political power, campaign donations. We know the government uses them for different things. So you have the whale of all whales here. Yes. So I think we see an approval in 2024. I don't think anything happens this year, but I could be wrong. You know, one of the theories I have is that Gary Gensler is going to time the approvals with the Grayscale lawsuit results. Because if the SEC takes a loss there, he's going to try to bury it in his political grand fashion that he's been doing. He'll do his media tour and whatever it is. So we could see it possibly in 2023, but I'm leaning more towards 2024, early 2024.
Yeah. So can we talk about XRP now? Let's really dive in. So Judge Torres, there was a few articles and things coming out where it might be a summoning of the parties come back together for more cases and fighting in court. We know it was a partial win, so technically XRP won and the SEC won. The institutional investors, I guess, you know, bought it properly, or the public, or vice versa. Can you speak on what you think is going to happen, or what else that you know?
Sure. So I've spoken to different attorneys and some of the people at Ripple as well. You know, it's interesting because it's funny how this happens in crypto, the tribalism, right? You have some people are like, oh, Ripple lost, XRP lost, but the fact of the matter is, and like you said, SEC took a win, but I think XRP and Ripple took the bigger slice of the pie from a win standpoint. Because if your asset is declared intrinsically not a security, that's a good thing. It just means you have to be careful how you package it and how it's sold in different venues and scenarios. So I think Ripple is in a driver's seat here, despite the SEC appeals and all these things that are going to happen. And part of what I've been talking about recently is that Gary Gensler cares a lot about optics. A lot about politics is optics. How do you look? Not necessarily the facts sometimes. Right now, Gary doesn't look good because they spent years going after Ripple. this is a highly publicized lawsuit, right? Getting mainstream coverage. So he's taking a big L right now, despite Ripple may have to pay a fine. I think a lot of people anticipated that Ripple would have to pay a fine. How much, we didn't know, of course. But another loss, like, for example, going against Coinbase, I think that was a very dumb move on the SEC's part. A publicly traded company that you green-lighted, that does a great job, listing tokens, and they have a very high scrutiny process. So they really screwed up there. And I think if we take a loss in the Grayscale situation, it's going to be really bad for the SEC. And one of the things I've noticed, as soon as that Ripple ruling came out, we all of a sudden saw Congress, Patrick McHenry, and all these guys were like, okay, we got to get crypto bills through. They moved faster than they ever did. And the bills got marked up. They have to go get voted on. And as Congress reconvenes in September, they're going to look to push it through the House.
Now, is that declaration that XRP is not a security, is that set in stone? Because I believe Eleanor Tourette of Fox Business, who you recently had on your show and who we're having on in a couple of weeks, actually, she revealed on Twitter some court documents that sort of alluded to the potential for a trial in the SEC case sometime in Q2 of 2024. So it doesn't seem like that's like, it seems like it was a potential win in the short term for XRP, even though it basically lost all the gains it had. It started at 50 cents and went up to almost $1, and it's now back at about 50 cents after, about a week later or so. But is that set in stone, or do you think there could be a different ruling sometime next year?
So the trials that are coming up are more on the Chris Larson, Brad Garlinghouse situation. Did they, I forgot the wording they used regarding this, but did they knowingly or do a bad job of how they sold some XRP and so forth, right? But XRP itself, as of today, the law is XRP is not a security, and that is not on trial, to my knowledge. Now, could the SEC appeal be pushed through where they bring that back? Sure. Is it very likely? No. But anything is possible, right? I think we have to let it play out. But here's the win, though, right? It's that the asset has been relisted on all U.S. exchanges. The day after the ruling, it was like everybody started launching their services again. So that's a big win for the market. And that look, XRP kind of represented all altcoins in the SEC's eyes, where look, we saw they name Algorand, Cardano. They're going after everything, man. So the fact that XRP set the precedence here is really good for the entire market and secondary sales. But to answer your question, I think the trials are more related to Brad Garlinghouse and Chris Larson and their situation.
So, kind of talking about that, because I actually put out a short today. I saw some, rumors are starting to swirl now that XRP is being listed on some of those big exchanges in the United States. People, the next big target, I feel like after something like Coinbase, at least, would be like a Robinhood, and some of these other, places where volume and maybe not even so many of the, crypto people are focused, but also you're getting some of that traditional finance people to buy in, Do you think that XRP will be listed on something like Robinhood, even though Robinhood has technically been delisting some assets and maybe is more scrutinous than, a Coinbase perhaps? And also we had a few questions, I guess I'll just throw in there from someone in the audience. How do you think that your XRP bag says, how will XRP fare in the next bull market, Tony? And also, could you see XRP flipping ETH or Bitcoin?
So with the Robinhood situation, as a company that has a lot of eyeballs on it, a lot of targets on it, they may be a bit hesitant. I think they will eventually, as maybe things progress with the lawsuit and they see how things are going. I think it's highly possible, I should say, that they're going to list it. But there is a chance that their legal team is like, hey, let's not do this, right? Because we don't want more pressure or more scrutiny or more targets on our back. So we could see a situation like that, but it's going to be their loss, because right now the law of the land is on the ruling it is not a security. And with regards to, I know JT, I didn't answer your question about the price movements. With regards to XRP losing all the price gains, I've been in the market so long where I didn't expect any major new all-time highs, because I understand the market cycle was not set up for that. There wasn't enough liquidity. We're not in a bull market. So I know there are some people like, oh, it's going to go to the moon, $10 on the ruling. It's like, no, you have to the nuance of that is, where are we in the market cycle? And I think sometimes people miss that, right? And the other thing is too, just because there's a ruling doesn't mean the next day it's going to pump. You have to give things time. The news spreads, the relisting happens, liquidity comes back. These things take time. So, and to David, your question about what could happen in the future bull market, I think it's going to do well. It's back on the exchanges. It has mainstream coverage. There's a clear distinction that it won the lawsuit, even though technically the SEC won against Ripple. So there's different narratives and optics here that support new all-time highs. But I tell people all the time, Bitcoin is the king. The market, Bitcoin, the liquidity goes to Bitcoin and then to the altcoin. So we have to see how Bitcoin does.
Well, this is all getting very exciting. I want to talk about some like the XRP updates. I've noticed, are we seeing that smart contracts are on the platform, or they're coming out? There's more NFT volume and a lot of more CBDC rumors. Can you speak on any of that there?
Yeah, sure. So I think with this clarity, and I just hit my old computer, we're going to see more building. So more devs are going to come on board. And there was activity before. Like, I personally minted an NFT collection on the XRP ledger. So you're going to see a lot more building. One of Ripple's employees, I think Monica Long on TV the other day, said they're revisiting their partnerships with US companies, which essentially says when that lawsuit happened, everything dropped in the US, right? Which makes sense. No company would want to touch the asset or the blockchain. So they're going to revisit that. There was the MasterCard news that their MasterCard is working with Ripple and Consensus and a bunch of other folks to test CBDCs. And look, I'm not the biggest fan of CBDCs, but I understand they're inevitable. I don't see anybody stopping this. Even the Bitcoiners, right? They can say, oh, CBDCs are the devil and 666 or whatever, right? Whatever they tweet. I'm like, your tweets are not going to stop.
They're gonna need something other than a casket carrying cash at the next conference, because I don't know how they're gonna get rid of it.
Exactly. So you're just talking about narratives. You're just putting hot air out there, right? And which is fine. Everybody has their opinion. But my thing is to engage with the regulators and people that I'm talking to in the lobbying groups to make sure, at least here in the United States, our CBDC, the digital dollar, respects our rights, the privacy, and it aligns with the Constitution. So the CBDCs are coming, and XRP is one of the platforms where they have built what's called the Ripple CBDC platform, where it helps banks to kind of go through the 3-click process of setting this up. And I recently interviewed Ripple's James Wallace, and we talk about this, and they're working with different central banks around the world.
Yeah, for sure. And it has to be a fast blockchain too. XRP still fits that bill. I mean, there are definitely, I think that's where a lot of these newer blockchains are trying to kind of, take market share, being the fastest, the greenest, because they know, you have the whole ESG and the, climate change and all that stuff that's going to factor into probably you would assume which of these chains gets chosen. And that's where you have like the Algorand's, the Hederas, Cardano, and all these trying to vie for that fast, carbon neutral, carbon negative type sentiment as well.
Yeah, for sure. And you mentioned Hedera. Boy, they have been doing some incredible stuff.
Yeah.
I'm actually going to be interviewing one of the founders in about 2 weeks, Lehman. I had interviewed Mance Harmon before, but man, whoever their business development team is and all these guys, they're doing an incredible job.
They're getting it popping.
One question I just have to, to pick your mind on what you think here, because, through the bear market, we have seen, I'm talking, Polygon, Algorand, Cardano, Hedera, it doesn't matter. We've seen all these chains make these, quote unquote partnerships, even Algorand with FIFA. I know that's a lot of our viewers will probably remember that hype. And, what is your thought on these partnerships? Are these just like behind the door, like back door, like just handshakes, like, hey, here's a bunch of money, say something about our product so we can, do something? Or do you actually think a lot of these partnerships have meat on the bone that they're going to like actually build into something? And mainly, as someone from the Algorand ecosystem, I think of FIFA. Do you actually think some of these big partnerships that we're seeing built in the bear market are going to do anything? Or is it just a lot of fluff to kind of just keep crypto relevant and try to, make some money, I guess?
Yeah, that's a great question. And at one point I was naive to these things until I started interviewing folks and learning about what's happening. So to your point, you kind of have to parse what is like just a sponsorship where your name and logo is just mentioned, and who's actually participating in your ecosystem. Are they building on your blockchain? And those are the fine writing, right? The fine details that you have to make sure you pay attention to. So when I see these partnerships launch, I go and I make sure I read up on it. What are they actually going to do? Are they building on the blockchain? Are they tokenizing it? Are they using the actual asset, right? These are important questions. And I think as creators, we're educating people about it. They have to make sure they read the fine details, because anyone can go, form a marketing partnership and plaster your logo and your name again with something, but that doesn't mean anything. That's a paid thing. And I also know, to your point, certain projects, which I don't think this is necessarily wrong, they do pay some folks to come in and build on their blockchain, to say, hey, come test it out, see if you like it. There is that element and layer, which once again, I don't think that's necessarily wrong, because it could, maybe you, for example, Hedera, I'm just using as an example, they have a whole bunch of big enterprises in their governing council. Did they pay some of those? Possibly.
Probably.
But if they're still there and building, that's a good sign, and that's where you got to parse through the details.
Yeah, so because I want to add to that, the partnership thing does get very interesting. So it brings up another point. What is your opinion on like code chains, private chains, and side chains? Because a lot of times I'm noticing like you'll see an announcement, and as you say, you read the fine print, and it says the technology is going to work on the back end. And then the question comes, is this the main net or is this the private? And I know XRP can host them, Algorand can host them, and various others. What's your opinion?
Yeah, that's a great question. So, at first, when I heard about these side chains and the private networks, I was a bit turned off. But then, as I started talking, and I'll give an example, I published an interview with the Hyperledger folks earlier today. I'm starting to see there is a need. Certain institutions, they want to have that private network because they're dealing with highly confidential information and finances and whatever it may be. So there's a need for that, right? But when I stepped back and I looked at it, it's still adoption. If they're building on your blockchain, that's a win. And if it's public knowledge, that's also a win, right? That, hey, they're using your blockchain, even though it's private and the transactions and certain things are not part of the public part of the blockchain. That is still a win. And I often talk about Metcalfe's law, and shout out to Raoul Pal, macro investor, who I learned about this theme about. I can't talk. Learned about this concept, where the more people who participate on your network, who join a network, the stronger it becomes and the more valuable it becomes. And the difference between, let's say, a telecom network back in the 80s and 90s or the internet is now you have equity and there's native tokens. So the value trickles down to the native token. And we see that even, for example, with Ethereum, with the ability to tokenize NFTs, ICOs, crypto kitties, whatever it is, right? The native token benefits highly from that, even if they're not using the token per se. Just the fact that they're building on the blockchain gives more value to it and makes it stronger. So if it's a private network or it's the main net, I think it's all a win if they're building on your blockchain.
For sure. So let's switch gears and go to another topic here. And this is actually something I'm just now starting to experience a little bit with. But Moonbeam was a side chain of Polkadot. It's something I was kind of like, I mainly found it because of Michael Arrington, started a fund, and I was like, okay, I'll watch it and just see what happens. Obviously the token has just like, I think it's down like 99.9 something. So like, not saying to buy this token or anything, but I recently went back to check my bags, which have dwindled down a lot since I did buy it. And I noticed that the website was gone. And I was like, oh crap, I got rugged. Well, no, actually they partnered and are actually building on Base, which is now Coinbase's layer 2 and whatnot. And it was kind of interesting. Like the whole switch up and the layout now actually is really smooth. I don't know if but it's also interesting because Coinbase doesn't offer the Glimmer or the Well token, which is their native token. So that's something else that's kind of has me puzzled, that I guess if things are built on Base, that doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to be assets listed by Coinbase. But what is your experience and knowledge, that you've gained so far talking to some of the Coinbase people about what this is, and are you bullish on it? What are your thoughts there?
I think overall it's good for the ecosystem, but I think people have to understand it's very centralized. and they have to be careful. Not that I don't trust Coinbase, but it's kind of, and look, here's the thing I'm struggling with, right? Is that I know I want to get to a world of full decentralization, but I know it's not going to happen overnight. It's kind of a crawl, walk, run. And in the interim, you're going to have a mixture of CeFi and DeFi, right? I don't think there's a way to escape it, even though there's some people gun ho on DeFi, forget about decentralized. But it's like, dude, did you just use a centralized exchange to buy this token, right? with fiat on ramp. So unfortunately, in the short term, I think these networks are going to be needed. I am bullish on it because it's a trusted platform in Coinbase, and it's going to help onboard more users to the ecosystem. Do I like it per se from and how I want to see the world maybe 10 years, 20 years from now? Not necessarily, because it's very centralized, but now they could make it very decentralized. They could add, different ways to do it, and we'll have to wait and see. I think it's a good thing. Long term, not necessarily. I'm hoping for something more decentralized.
Yeah, I largely agree with that point that it'll likely drive adoption, but maybe isn't necessarily the best, piece of innovation that we've seen over the last handful of years. But I want to get your opinion on L2s in general, because Coinbase just launched theirs. Shiba Inu recently just launched one, I believe, called Shibarium or something like that. And then you have, critics like Justin Bones, who's a very well-known, crypto critic, I suppose, at this point. And he is very critical of all of the developers that are building on L2s and sacrificing potential security of L1s. And, I'm curious, do we even need all of these L2s? It doesn't even seem like many of them are even faster and cheaper than some of the newer L1s like Algorand, Solana, and things like that. So I fail to really recognize why we need them in the first place when there are better L1s out there. So I'm curious what your opinion is on that.
Yeah, great point. JT, I've honestly thought about this idea or this topic on over the past few months, because we're seeing, to your point, how many layer twos are going to be for Ethereum? Jesus Christ, like, come on, right? And it almost seems like it's a bit of just trying to get some money. Like, I'm going to create it. Hey, here's this new amazing layer 2 for Ethereum and scaling. And it's like, okay, we already have something like that. There's already 5 projects out there. So it's kind of nuts what's happening, but it's kind of par for the course. So you go back to the .com boom, and everybody's trying to copy each other. Everybody wants to have the next .com and doing this and that. And there's clones, right? There was so many search engines, and we know some of them are going to die, and there's going to be left a Google, right? And then look, don't get me wrong, you have Bing as well. While it may not be the same market share, it's still there, and Yahoo to a certain degree. So you're going to have that dynamic. There's going to be the clear leader. You're going to have the secondary, tertiary participants and competitors. But yeah, man, it's getting frothy. There's so many layer 2s. It's like my head is spinning. I don't know which one to keep up with. But going back to what we were talking about earlier, who's building on these layer 2s? So I really like what the Polygon team is doing. They've gotten some huge brands to come build, and you can't ignore that. So I'm more bullish on Polygon as a layer 2. Obviously, there's others as well.
So just real quick on that Polygon comment, does it worry you? I saw a tweet, I think it was yesterday or the day before, that 87% of the total supply is in the top 100 holders' hands. And there's definitely some centralization risks with, the keys to the smart contracts and things like that. Like, how much, and obviously I know you may be bullish. I don't know if you're holding, Matic, the token, but,
right.
What are your thoughts on some of that stuff? Like, when you're, how do you take that and then decide, is this really a solid project and something we should be wanting to see move forward?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think it's very nuanced. So I'll give an example of how I approach it with investing. I have my long-term hold bags where I'm not touching it. And then I have some of these coins, which from a speculative standpoint, I'm swing trading. So I'm not like a true believer, if you want to call it that, but I see an opportunity to make money in the market. And I swing trade Bitcoin, Ethereum, and different things because of how use the volatility to your advantage, right?
Yep.
But to your point, there are some centralized risks there with some of these chains, and that's where you have to follow them closely and keep doing your research. I think that honestly, that's how I've navigated. If I see a red flag, I'm like, okay, I think I'm going to exit the majority of my holdings with this. And I know that's not like an easy answer or whatever, but that's honestly how I've navigated it. Because look, facts change, and if as we learn, I think we have to pivot. And to your point, Polygon's doing great, a lot of partnerships and so forth, but there are risks. So you kind of have to weigh the pros and cons.
Yeah, for sure. Something else that I kind of want to pick your brain on, and I followed somewhat of your technical analysis, and sometimes when you show, I don't know if it's actually you who does it or if you've just retweeted and kind of shown, that you agree. But I want to say you kind of showed in one of them that, you had a Bitcoin maybe topping out at this, bear market rally we've seen around like 40K, and then falling back down to possible, retestings of, the lows that we saw around 20K or even 15K, something like that before, the Bitcoin halving, and we actually see this next bull run. What are your thoughts on the overall market, right now that we're in, and where do you see us going with, obviously Bitcoin having a pretty decent fall? I think it was like the largest drop it had since FTX, a couple days ago. So what are your thoughts there?
Yeah, it's tricky, man. And I tried to tell people, like, you have to form both a bullish and a bearish thesis. You can't just be bullish all the time, and you can't be bearish all the time. And you can use both to your advantage to make money. I know people who do that. I'm not great at shorting, and I don't necessarily mess with leverage. I do more swing trading, but there's people who short and make money off of it. My thesis was we were going to see a similar move to what we did in 2019. Now, up until about a week ago or 2 weeks ago, it seemed like it was on track where we have that retracement move. Bitcoin tops out at maybe 40K or just over 40K. It could still do that, even though we had that big sharp decline. But we are in different macro environment where the Fed just said, we're going to raise rates again. And it's also the timeline is shifted later into summer versus 2019. I think it hit that retracement peak around June, if I'm not mistaken. So there are a couple of factors which are bearish, but Bitcoin could surprise us. It could be maybe in the next 2 weeks, all of a sudden Gary Gensler said, "Oh shit, I'm going to take a big L in this grayscale lawsuit. Let me approve a bunch of ETFs," and then the market rallies, right? So you kind of have to form the thesis. What is the bearish scenario? What's likely to happen? What's the bullish scenario? Right now, I think I'm leaning more bearish because of the Fed and the macro environment. It's pretty tough. But I hope I'm wrong. And we go to 40K and then roll over a little bit and then start slowly, steadily moving upwards into the halving of next year.
I'm actually curious about the halving because throughout the history of Bitcoin, the price has basically moved in conjunction with the overall market outside of it. It's not just the crypto market, but essentially when there was quantitative easing and there was more money flowing into the market, Bitcoin was doing great. But we're in a totally different environment than the last 2 or 3 halving cycles. Do you think that this halving could go off a little differently than the last two? The last two, of course, we saw a lead up into the halving and then a bull run after that. But that was also in a time period where there was more liquidity in the market. Do you think there's a chance that the 4-year halving could be basically a dud this year, especially since each halving has less of an impact on the supply shock, each round?
Oh yeah, look, and there's Bitcoin maximalists and certain people say, no, it has to be this way. No, I've learned, man. I've learned my lesson that, once again, going back to those theses, what's the bearish and the bullish scenarios? You have to look at both. You can't just put on your blinders and say, man, it's going to pump. I'm going to see the same thing happen. There's nothing guaranteed. No one has a crystal ball here. But to your point, it is a different scenario. And that's where I think, and once again, this is a thesis, that the Fed will, I personally think, continue to raise rates till the end of the year. I think they'll pause. And then next year, around maybe the time of the halving, maybe before or a bit after, they're going to start to cut rates because the economy won't be able to take it anymore, right? At some point, they're going to break some things and it's going to be really bad. And then the election cycle is next year. And we've seen presidents use the Fed as a tool, right or wrong, right? And they'll start cutting rates and the economy is great. And I think they're going to start QE next year, honestly. And once again, people may say, "Oh, you're crazy" or whatever, but I think, once again, optics, right? Presidential election year. I think they start cutting rates. I think QE starts. And I think the timing will work out for Bitcoin. The other big catalyst is that ETF. because even if we're not in a fully quantitative easing environment, that ETF gets approved by BlackRock, it will start porting over a lot of the capital from retirement accounts and that were in other assets. And then I think just the other day, I don't know if you guys saw it, it was yesterday, Blockworks reported on Lockheed Martin. You know, they're looking to put their pension capital in crypto to get a higher return. The narrative is shifting. I think these things are aligning. The stars are aligning to a certain degree. So we'll see. Maybe I'm too bullish or optimistic there, but I think if you look at it, forget about crypto for a second, the macro, the Fed can't keep raising rates forever. They have to stop, and they're going to QE again.
So I was just commenting on Michael Saylor. I'm like, so it seems like Michael Saylor's thesis has been correct with what he has been doing. Michael's strategy, stock has been going crazy, his holdings, and it still has that bottom, you know, where he's like hasn't really been reached. I just want to say, and then also, do we think Gary Gensler and Jerome Powell own some Bitcoin?
Gary Gensler for sure got some
ETH.
ETH.
I think Gary has some because he was teaching about it at MIT, you know, before he tried to go work for Binance. So I think he has some. I'm curious if he has some Algorand. Remember he was talking about you could build Uber on Algorand.
Man, that whole like thing and the guy who creates the song a day on ETH and that whole song he released on it, like all that stuff was so funny. Before we go off the topic though, I do want to ask, you know, do you think, because you were kind of saying, you know, something's going to break, right? And obviously we know CBDCs are an inevitability; they are coming. Do you think that we could see some type of CBDC implementation as early as, you know, in the next coming years, especially with the Fed now, and like almost seeing like hey, everything's broke, but this CBDC and the Fed now program is going to fix it. And this is, you know, here's your stimmy checks. Do you think we're going to see that type of QE? Or, you know, when you say QE is going to get turned back on, do you just think rates are going to go down? You know, what are your thoughts there?
Oh, sure. So was it earlier this year that they raised the debt ceiling? Yeah, it was earlier.
It was this year.
Yeah. So the spending is going to increase. How are they going to pay for it, right? And I know that yes, they raise taxes, but let's be honest, it comes from QE, right? And then they're going to prop the markets up. They can't stop QE. Yes, they can pause to help reduce inflation and yada yada. But we've seen go back on a 30, 40-year outlook, right? It starts back again and they start printing, and then the money supply increases. And we know what that means. Asset prices increase. So it's going to come back. It's just a matter of when. And with regards to CBDCs, I think it's around the corner, man. I from what I'm hearing, I was actually going to be interviewing Chris Giancarlo of the Digital Dollar Project again soon. They just did something with Western Union for a retail cross-border testing of a CBDC, something like that. So they were waiting for the Western Union people to confirm. I was going to have both of them on the show. It's coming, man. And I think to your point, look, AI and tech is taking away a lot of jobs. There's not going to be enough work for people, right? And I think they're going to have to introduce some sort of universal basic income. As much as I personally don't like that, I think, how do you solve that problem with the amount of people, jobs going away, right? The first wave, and a lot of people in the US felt it, was jobs moving overseas, where you can get things done cheaper and much quicker and faster and whatever it is, cheap labor, right? Unfortunately, capitalism, that's how it's going to go, right? To make the most profit. And then the next wave is AI and tech and automation. What are people going to do? How are they going to work? Where are they going to work? So that's a big question. That's a big problem. And I think they're going to introduce UBI, and it's going to probably be CBDCs, programmable. Hey, here's download the Fed wallet or whatever, or your JP Morgan wallet. You can get this monthly payment. It comes directly and you can spend it. The infrastructure's there. I think we're
One thing I want to add on that is, do you think some of the popular layer one networks that we see in the space, like the Algorand that are fast, secure, scalable, even Algorand touting being one of the ones that's quantum resistant, you know, to attacks, and other ones like Solana that are super fast, you know, Cardano and stuff. Do you think some of these networks are going to, like, would it be, if there is a universal basic income, do you think that we would see it where, like, no matter what chain you use, the money can flow and get to your wallet? Or do you think that, you know, it's just going to be a totally controlled, you know, chain that the federal government creates and has everything, and like you either got to get on or you're out of luck?
Yeah, some of that is still TBD. To your point, the infrastructure is there. Just look at USDC stablecoin. It's available on different blockchains. There's nothing stopping the CBDC from being able to do that. But I think they're going to try to control it where maybe they use one or two blockchains and probably some of their own proprietary stuff. And then from what I've heard from talking to Chris Giancarlo of the Digital Dollar Project, it's not necessarily that the Fed is going to send you the money directly. And we saw Congressman Tom Emmer, these guys put out bills saying, no, we don't want that, right? It may flow through your regular banks. From what he's saying, it might go through the federal connected pipelines to JP Morgan, Bank of America, and so forth. It's going to flow through there and you get it from your app. And that's what Chris said. Obviously, that's not confirmed, but I think that makes more sense versus the Fed trying to manage a wallet for how many billions of or millions of Americans, right? So I think that makes more sense, but who knows, and that's the tricky part, and which blockchains, because we see, just as the MasterCard partnership, consensus is part of that. So Ethereum is going to be used, XRP ledger, Ripple is part of it. So we see Ripple is doing a ton of stuff with different central banks. There's a high possibility the XRP ledger gets used, but there's no guarantee. It could be another blockchain, honestly.
Yeah, so that was brings up a point in my mind. When you go back to Hedera, they have that app drop, right? You want to speak on that?
Oh, sure. Yeah, that's a great point. And thank you for bringing that up, because I covered it and I totally forgot. But yeah, the Fed, was it Fed Now? They were saying this drop app is a great example of how funds can be moved with CBDCs and so forth, if I remember correctly. But that's a great example. Hedera could be the one, right?
And it makes you think that Hedera could be, because they already got the partnerships with Google, Boeing. I mean, big T-Mobile, massive, people are already on that governing council. And I know, there's a lot of people who want to, pick apart which chain is better. But at the end of the day, it comes down to money. Like, where's the money? Where's the power behind these chains?
Yeah.
And that could be the determining factor on who wins this, CBDC pilot program and stuff like that, and gets used more.
Yeah. Oh, go ahead.
No, I was going to add, then you look at PayPal, right? They're slowly making more moves. It's not like the Libra or anything. Oh, your JD pulling up. But yeah, so PayPal too, with was it Pay USD? So they now you can use blockchain on their application. It's happening more and more.
Yeah, it's a great point. And this is why I just remind people who are watching or listening, diversify.
Yes.
Don't fall in love with one chain and say, oh, this is going to go to moon, and listen to, some YouTubers who do super hyper speculation, right? It's sometimes ridiculous price points. Do your own research and diversify, because we don't know what the ultimate winners are going to be. Yes, short term, you can make money. I'm swing trading, and look, I made money in the past bull market off of Bitcoin and Ethereum, but you just don't know. So diversify. I have some HBAR tokens. I have some XRP tokens. I have Bitcoin. Bitcoin has been, I think, the safest bet out of all cryptos. And look, the most riskiest, I think, is meme coins, which I don't touch.
90% down, overnight.
Meme coins and illiquid NFTs are probably not where you should go to try to make a killing. Definitely, I own some NFTs. I've dabbled in meme coins as well, but yeah, you're right. You really shouldn't be, crossing your fingers and praying that this meme coin or NFT or something like that is going to be what actually makes you rich in the next bull run. It could happen. It certainly could, but I wouldn't throw your life savings in it and be like, who's that Dogecoin guy that made millions and now is still crying that the price is still down.
He down so bad.
He literally, Slum Doge literally put out a tweet today. He said, "What would you do if you had lost however much he's lost?" And I'm like, I'd be crying. What are you talking about? Like that's what I'd be doing. Speaking of, kind of another hot topic, I feel like in the space, with Elon Musk and Dogecoin and meme coins and even X and him taking over Twitter, and what are your thoughts on Twitter becoming what do you think Musk is going to do with X now? What are your thoughts there?
Sure. Man, Elon is fascinating. He's so polarizing as well. And there's obviously a political layer to him. There's a pop cultural layer to him. There's so many layers, right? But all of that aside, I understand his vision. I don't know if Twitter is the tool. Maybe it is, because its user base is very much on mobile phones, and the short, quick ability to send content is there. And then I interviewed the CEO of eToro, and they formed a partnership with eToro to integrate stock and crypto data. So I see his vision. How long it will take to get there, and will he hit a lot of roadblocks? I think so, because so far it hasn't been going that great. But I've seen people doubt Elon and say, "Man, you suck," and this has happened. They doubted him with Tesla, they doubted him with SpaceX, and much more. And he was able to push through and create some great products and great things, right? Do amazing things. So I think he'll eventually get there, but it's going to be a slow process. He's going to get a lot of criticism, and he understands crypto. He understands tech. He seems to understand social media as well to a certain degree, but let's see. There's no guarantees.
Well, he got me to pay $8 a month for X, so finally broke into the wallet and cranked that out. So we'll see what that does for us. But yeah, I mean, he definitely is smart. He knows what he's doing, and I'm sure. I mean, I didn't even know, because I just wasn't even paying attention back in the day to this. I didn't even know he had turned his X.com into, what was it, PayPal? I think was the yeah. I had no idea. So it seems like he's trying to recreate and do that again, which I think is kind of it's interesting, and I think a lot of people are going to be waiting and watching to see what he does.
Yeah, and to your great point, like, he understands payments. I mean, that's part of his pedigree, right? Which is incredible when you think about it. A lot of people don't associate him with PayPal, and they're like, "Oh yeah, he's one of the founders of PayPal." They usually think about Peter Thiel and these guys, but Elon's been there, man. The guy, I mean, some of the largest companies, right?
Yeah, at this point too, he could just throw it out there, and then something's gonna stick. You got a lot of businesses that are profitable.
Absolutely. Sure. Hey, let's move on to a couple of these community questions before we wrap up today. We've got a couple more tuning in. So we've got Christian. What's going on, Christian? He's asking, which blockchain subsectors like SocialFi, gaming, maybe even DeFi, etc., do you think will be the winners in the next bull market?
Yeah, that's a great question. And what I've noticed, and you guys probably as well, every bull market has a narrative. Like, it was DeFi summer, the last one, right? And then back in 2017 was ICOs and the Bitcoin forks and things like that. So I was of the mindset, at the end of last year, I put out a prediction for the next bull market, and I said AI driven tokens will be one narrative. The next could be GameFi, although one could argue that fizzled out a little bit with Axie Infinity and these other things. So I don't know what the next one is, but I think AI is gonna be one of the narratives, if not the leading narrative. And some of their tokens may pop off given what's happening in the general markets around AI.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. I mean, ChatGPT, created by OpenAI, is launching their WorldCoin. I'm sure they're going to eventually try to tie that together as well. But I actually think, GameFi has fizzled from where it was, but I think it has a lot of potential. I think the issue is just getting from where it is now to actually just really fun games. Because once we get to that point, I think it's game over. People love playing games, but currently the games that are offered on most blockchains that have gaming really are like, jumping back in time, like 10 years. So it's like, do we really want to play that? It's cool for a little bit because it's something new. I can earn tokens, but I don't think they're fun enough yet to have that broad appeal. But I do think there's plenty of potential there. And Christian has a follow-up question to that. And he's asking, will we finally see a killer DApp in the next bull market? And I guess I'll add to that, what would a killer DApp look like to you?
Wow, that's a hard one. I need to think that through, but certainly I think something that allows you to manage your online profile, and we may be too early for this, where in a sense of your identity and being able to tokenize that and then have a secondary market where you sell it to advertisers. So you earn off your digital identity. I think that's going to be a big thing in the future. Will it happen this next round? Probably not. There's still a lot of development that's needed, and to make it easy for people to onboard, right? I know guys like the folks at Unstoppable Domains and so forth are trying to do that, where it's like a named domain, kind of like if you have jt.com, and then you can send any crypto because the wallets are in the back end set up. We can send each other money easily and much more. That's in the works. Will it be at that place where it's fully decentralized and all these things? I'm not sure, honestly.
You mentioned Unstoppable Domains, and I just want to give a shout out to Non-Fungible Domains. They're a sponsor of this podcast. They have a similar project out there currently. They have human readable addresses for their Algorand wallets. You can hit up the nextblock.algo with a donation if you're feeling if you're feeling so generous. But we've got one last community question I'm seeing from IRL Algo. How you doing, IRL? She was wondering if you could go over the differences between blockchain and crypto, and because a lot of people use those words synonymously, but they definitely have different meanings and different potential.
Yeah, and that's a great question. And I know sometimes we've had narratives that said blockchain, not crypto. But guess what? You kind of they both go hand in hand, because the many blockchains, which are permissionless or public, need a native token to help grease the wheels for the network to actually function. When you have a private blockchain or what's called a permission blockchain, you don't need a token. And that could be an agreement between, for example, JT, Will, and myself could say, let's form the next blockchain, and it's private. You guys can, and the public can't see the transaction, but we are transacting with each other. Now, if it was public, we would need a native token, and participants can come build on it. It's more open source. So the TLDR, the short answer, public blockchains need a native token to function. Think of it as the grease to get the wheels moving. Private blockchains don't need a token. So it depends which blockchains you're talking about, private or public.
Well, the cool part about that, when I think more about these companies, when private chains, it's like they're trying to replace their CRM and essentially in their inventories on the back end. And one could say, why would they show that to the public? How much work they hold on to at the end of the month. So it does make a lot of sense of how some of these businesses are going to have a lot of private deals providing the technology with licensing and things of that nature.
So funny enough, in my interview with Karen Otoni on from Hyperledger, I published it this morning. We talk exactly what you're saying. We gave the mock scenario. Let's say Apple wanted to use a public blockchain, but also a private. What scenarios? So the private, maybe it's between them and their where they source their parts and their chips. They don't want competitors and different people to know. And even maybe they source certain materials from different places. They don't want to know I'm paying this guy this in Japan and this guy this in New England or whatever, right? So there's a lot of business details you want to keep private, and that makes sense as in doing business is logical, right?
Yeah, and that makes sense too. I'm going to butcher the way he paraphrases it, but Silvio has said something similar regarding private chains, where essentially the private chain is like your home. You want your privacy inside your home, but occasionally you want to leave your home and go to the public markets, and those public markets are the main chain. That's where all the fun's happening. Maybe there's a nightclub or some cool metaverse or something that you can get into. But at the end of the night, you want to go back home to your private home. And I think that's a great way to look at it. And I think that is largely what's going to happen. We're going to have this fusion of public private entities. And it's going to be really interesting to see how the space evolves.
Sure. Tony, my son's got one last question. He's obviously a big holder of crypto bags, but he needs to know what crypto should he be buying right now so that when he's 18, he can be a multimillionaire. So that's the question he needs to know.
Wait, I think Gary Gensler may be watching the stream, so I got to be careful. Not financial advice. Diversify, little guy. Bitcoin, Ethereum, XRP, HBAR. That's what I'm doing. DCA.
Heck yeah. We definitely got to get some of the big ones. And so thanks for that.
Great.
You're gonna see a legal notice in the mail in about 18 years from that little one. Oh man. Yeah. So this has been absolutely fantastic. Everyone that's tuned in, we really appreciate it. Make sure you smash that like button, hit that subscribe button. And do anyone else have any other questions before we take off today?
I just want to say, obviously, to everybody who's watching right now, be sure to head over to Tony's YouTube channel. I tagged it and linked it at the very beginning of the show, so it is in the chat there. But make sure you give him a subscribe and a follow, like those videos, because he is always interviewing some great and amazing guests, and we take notes from him. So, definitely give him a follow, and thanks so much for joining the show.
Thank you, guys. Great to be here.
And that's actually a good part to plug our upcoming shows as well. On top of course, Tony, who's a great guest, we have Stacey Warden coming on, the CEO of the Algorand Foundation. We've got Anthony Scaramucci coming on. We have Eleanor Tourette from Fox Business, Mark Yusko, and a whole bunch of great names going into the end of the year. We're super excited for that. So if you aren't subscribed already, definitely do that. Ping that notification bell, and hopefully we'll see you in the next video.
Peace.